Amanda has always lived her life with independence and self-confidence. At 30, she had a stable job, a small apartment in a quiet city, and supportive friends. She believed that the world was a safe place until an incident made her question that certainty. It was an ordinary night, and Amanda was at home, surfing the internet after an exhausting day at work. The soft sound of rain outside created a welcoming atmosphere in their cozy apartment. She was scrolling through photos on social media, distracted, when she noticed something strange. A photo. A photo that made her freeze in terror. The image showed her living room, seen from outside, with her sitting on her sofa, completely oblivious to the intruding lens. The photo was blurry, but it was unmistakably her. The only possible explanation was that someone was watching her through her window. Amanda's heart raced, and her stomach twisted in apprehension. She stared at the photo, trying to understand what was happening. Who could have taken that photo? How had someone managed to get so close to her window without her noticing? Her hands were shaking when she saw the photo being shared on a social media group called Observer in the Shadow. People commented on the frightening voyeurism of the image, suggesting that the person who took it should be exposed and held accountable. Amanda felt invaded and exposed. He ran to the window, looking into the darkness outside, but there was no one in sight. The feeling that someone was watching her made her tremble with fear. She drew the curtains and locked all the doors and windows in the apartment, desperately wishing it was all just a misunderstanding. Over the next few days, Amanda's paranoia only increased. She couldn't shake the feeling of being constantly watched. When I was on the street, I looked over my shoulder with every step. When she was at home, the slightest noise would make her jump in fright. Then, things started to get worse. She began to notice shadows moving in the periphery of her vision when she was at home. At night, the shadows became more defined and disturbing. She heard soft whispers and sighs, as if someone was right outside her door. One night, Amanda was on the phone with a friend when she noticed something strange. A whispery sigh echoed over the line, and her friend's voice turned worried. "What is this, Amanda? You're not alone, are you?" Amanda, her heart in her throat, replied that she was alone, but her friend's voice sounded doubtful. She hung up the phone, terrified, and tears came to her eyes. She could no longer ignore the fact that someone was invading her privacy, someone who seemed to always be watching, waiting in the shadows. Amanda knew she needed to do something. The next day, she went to the local police station, hoping to find help. She told her story to the officer on duty, who seemed skeptical but made a note in a log. However, he explained that until there was a clear threat to their safety, they could not take concrete action. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Amanda returned home, knowing her nightmare was far from over. The watcher in the shadow continued to torment her, stealing her peace and sense of security. As the weeks passed, Amanda felt increasingly isolated and helpless. She didn't know who was chasing her and why. Her nights were full of nightmares, and she could barely sleep. Terror was consuming her life, and she knew that sooner or later she would have to face her pursuer and discover the truth behind the watcher in the shadow. Amanda couldn't escape the sinister gaze that seemed to follow her at every step. The shadows continued to move outside his window at night, and the unsettling whispers continued to echo in his mind. Paranoia had become his constant companion. Feeling that the police were not taking her seriously enough, Amanda decided to take drastic action. She needed to discover the identity of the stalker who tormented her. He hired a highly recommended private detective and shared with him all the evidence he had collected so far. The detective, named Michael, was an experienced man with a reputation for cracking the most complex cases. He carefully analyzed the photo the stalker had taken and began his investigation. What he discovered shocked Amanda. After several weeks of searching, Michael managed to identify the author of the photograph. It was Tom, Amanda's ex-boyfriend. He had been unable to accept the end of their relationship and was willing to go to extreme lengths to keep her under his watchful eye. Tom was obsessed with Amanda, monitoring her every move, following her around, and somehow managing to get close enough to take compromising photos. Upon discovering the stalker's true identity, Amanda felt a mixture of relief and fear. She knew that Tom was capable of doing terrible things, but she had never imagined that he was capable of such obsession and invasion of privacy. She thanked Michael for solving the riddle, but now Tom's pursuit seemed to be intensifying. Amanda couldn't ignore the fact that now that Tom knew she had discovered him, he was even more determined to keep her under surveillance. He began sending threatening messages to her cell phone, some of them saying things like, "You can't run away from me, and I will always be with you." Paranoia and fear continued to consume Amanda's life. She no longer felt safe, even in her own apartment. Things began to mysteriously disappear from her apartment, such as clothes, personal effects, and even her pet cat, Whiskers. She felt like she was constantly being watched, even in her own refuge. One day, Amanda decided to face her fears. She called the police and showed them all the threatening messages and evidence she had against Tom. Finally, they recognized the seriousness of the situation and began to act. They issued a restraining order against Tom, prohibiting him from approaching Amanda or making contact with her. The sense of security provided by the restraining order was short-lived. Tom didn't seem willing to obey the laws. Instead, he continued to hover around Amanda, always a step away, as if the rules didn't apply to him. She noticed shadows moving at night and heard the ominous whispers shortly after the police call. Amanda knew her stalker was everywhere, watching every move she made. She knew she needed to take drastic measures to protect herself. She decided it was time to escape the city, change her identity, and start a new life in an unknown place where Tom couldn't find her. She packed her things, said goodbye to her friends and family, and left. His new name, city, and life were well-kept secrets. She installed advanced security systems in her new home, but still lived in fear, constantly looking over her shoulder, always hoping her stalker might reappear. Amanda knew her fight wasn't over yet. She was determined not to let Tom find and terrorize her again. Even if it meant living on constant alert, she was willing to do anything to protect her life and her sanity. Amanda's persecution had turned her into a shadow of who she used to be. She lived with the feeling that an observer in the shadow was still watching her, waiting for the right moment to reappear. She was determined to keep her secret hidden and face her stalker, no matter what it took. The battle was far from over, and the outcome remained uncertain. Amanda's life had been in constant turmoil since becoming the target of the obsessive stalker, her ex-boyfriend Tom. She had adopted a new identity and moved to a distant city, but the feeling of being watched continued to haunt her relentlessly. The shadows and whispers in the periphery of his vision persisted, as if the stalker was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to reappear. Amanda began to feel like she was cornered, with Tom getting closer and closer, regardless of the security measures he had taken. It was a particularly dark night when Amanda realized something was wrong. She was leaving a local cafe, walking hurriedly home, when she felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The shadows on the street seemed to twist and take sinister shapes, and the unsettling whispers surrounded her. She could hear her own breathing quicken as she headed home, aware that she was being watched. However, Amanda had learned the importance of remaining calm and protecting herself. She took out her cell phone and dialed a number that she had memorized from the first moment she realized that Tom was stalking her. It was Michael's number, the private detective who had helped her identify the stalker. "Michael, I need help," Amanda whispered, as she kept an eye on the shadows surrounding her. On the other end of the line, Michael reassured Amanda and told her to go to a well-lit public place where he would meet her. She followed his instructions, trying to ignore the feeling that she was being hunted by her stalker. When Amanda arrived at the scene, Michael was already there, waiting in a discreet car. He opened the door for her and quickly led her inside. As they drove, Amanda told Michael about the shadows, the whispers, and the feeling that Tom was getting closer and closer. The detective took Amanda to a safe place, away from her home, and promised to maintain constant surveillance. He also contacted the police, sharing all the evidence Amanda had collected against Tom and asking for stronger protective measures. Amanda was determined not to become a helpless victim. However, Tom's pursuit didn't stop. The following days were a continuous nightmare. Amanda continued to receive threatening messages on her cell phone, some of them suggesting that Tom knew where she was and what she was doing. She was seeing shadows and hearing whispers everywhere she went. The paranoia was overwhelming, and Amanda began to question her own sanity. She was exhausted, always looking over her shoulder, hoping that Tom might show up at any moment. The battle against her stalker was pushing her to the limit of her endurance, and she knew she needed to find a way to end this relentless pursuit. Amanda and Michael continued to gather evidence against Tom. The police increased surveillance around his new home and requested an arrest warrant against his stalker. However, Tom always seemed one step ahead, managing to evade the authorities. On a particularly dark night, when Amanda's paranoia was at its peak, she noticed something terrible. A photograph of herself, taken on the street moments before, appeared on her cell phone. It was a clear message that Tom was there, watching every move she made. Determined to put an end to this persecution, Amanda and Michael devised a plan. They knew that Tom was determined to keep her under his watchful eye, but this time, they would be the hunters, not the prey. Amanda lured Tom into a fake encounter in a public place, while Michael and the police waited nearby. When Tom appeared, the trap closed, and he was finally detained by authorities. The arrest of her stalker brought Amanda temporary relief, but she knew she would still have to face the trauma of everything she had experienced. She was determined to start her life over and regain the sense of security that had been stolen from her. But even with her stalker behind bars, Amanda knew that fear and paranoia would continue to torment her. Her fight was not over yet. Tom's arrest brought temporary relief to Amanda's life. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope that the persecution that had terrified her was finally coming to an end. However, the battle was not yet won. She knew she needed to prepare herself for what was coming, the fight for her own survival. The legal case against Tom began, and Amanda was determined to ensure he was convicted and stopped from continuing to threaten her life. She testified before the court, sharing her horror story with jurors and detailing the torment she had faced at the hands of her stalker. Justice was finally beginning to prevail. However, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, even while in court. Shadows seemed to follow her wherever she went, and she heard unsettling whispers in the hallways of the court building. Paranoia continued to torment her, despite Tom being behind bars. On the day of the verdict, Amanda hoped that Tom's conviction would bring a sense of finality and relief. However, when she heard the not guilty verdict, a wave of despair overcame her. The legal system had failed to protect her, and now she knew she was facing her stalker once again. Amanda was determined not to be a helpless victim. She knew that the fight for her survival was far from over. She beefed up security in her new home, installing more advanced surveillance cameras and alarm systems. She took self-defense classes and began attending therapy sessions to deal with the trauma she had experienced. Still, the shadows and whispers persisted. Paranoia was a constant part of his life. Every noise in the night made her jump in fright. Every movement in the periphery of her vision made her shake with fear. The stalker was always present, always watching. In a moment of desperation, Amanda received a message from an unknown number on her cell phone. It was a photo of herself, taken from afar, as she was leaving her therapy. The words in the message were simple and threatening. "I will never stop." She knew Tom was out there, somewhere, watching her again. The feeling of helplessness overwhelmed her. She had done everything in her power to protect herself, but the stalker continued to infiltrate her life. The relentless pursuit was pushing her to the limit. Amanda knew it was time to face Tom once and for all. She knew he was determined to have her under his watchful eye, but she could no longer live in fear. She decided it was time to reverse roles and transform herself from victim to hunter. She began investigating Tom's life, gathering information that could lead her to him. She knew she needed to act with caution and determination. With the help of Michael, the private detective, she devised the plan of action. Amanda lured Tom into a fake date, as they had done before. She chose a secluded place where they could meet without interference from other people. As she waited in the darkness, shadows and whispers surrounding her, Amanda was determined to finally face her stalker. When Tom appeared, the trap closed. Amanda confronted him with the courage she had accumulated throughout her long journey of terror. She was no longer the same person he knew. She was willing to fight for her life and no longer be a helpless victim. Amanda was not alone. Michael and the police were lurking nearby, ready to intervene if things got out of hand. The tension in the air was palpable as Amanda and Tom faced each other in the darkness. Finally, the words were spoken and the accusations were laid. Amanda faced her stalker, forcing him to recognize the terror he'd inflicted on her. The relentless persecution had come to an end. Amanda was determined to take control of her life and her destiny. Tom was arrested, and this time the evidence was overwhelming. Justice prevailed, and he was convicted of stalking, invasion of privacy, and threats. Amanda was finally free of the Shadow Watcher who had terrorized her for so long. The battle for their survival had come to an end. Amanda learned the importance of seeking help, being strong, and never giving up. She was determined to get her life back and not let fear rule her. Her story was a lesson in courage and determination, a reminder that inner strength can overcome even the most relentless persecution.